Is Sukuna more talented than Gojo? Let's talk about it, but spoilers beware. All right, first of all, shout out to Sam who asked me this today, and specifically Sam said, is Sukuna more talented because he didn't have the six eyes, and yet his understanding of cursed energy was on par with Gojo's. In addition to that, he had an open domain. He was able to use reverse curse technique on other people, and he seemingly utilized binding vows better. So is he more talented? And before I get into my answer for that, I want to break down kind of the difference between talent and skill, or talent and hard work, if we want to call it that, because there's like a very specific meaning to that word within Jujutsu Kaisen. Because in JJK, Gojo tells us that a sorcerer's strength is 80% their innate talent. And the context of that word there is referring to things outside of your control. So your curse technique that you were born with, right? That you had no agency in choosing, or in his case, inheriting the six eyes, right? That is Gojo's talent. Yuji was said to have no talent because he wasn't born with the curse technique, right? So Sukuna's ability to match Gojo in these realms, even without having the six eyes, I wouldn't classify that as his talent per se, but more so his genius or his skill or his hard work. And not to get like in the weeds on semantics here, but just so that we're all operating from the same place when we analyze who's more talented. So by that definition, Gojo is one of, if not the most talented sorcerer of all time, because he was blessed with both the Limitless and the Six Eyes. And this was a fundamental part of his character arc, right? Are you the strongest because you're Gojo, or are you Gojo because you're the strongest? Was he more than just his gifts? So to cite back to this meme here, Gojo has the easier path to victory because of his blessings, because of his talent, and yet Sukuna is able to keep pace with him even with the much harder road. But I actually don't think this meme is accurate, and I think that Sukuna's talent, on the definition we've established here, is pretty much equal to Gojo's. And that's because just like with the Six Eyes and Limitless for Gojo, Sukuna was born with some insane gifts that have nothing to do with his genius or his hard work. And those are, first of all, his body. The four arms, two mouths that were said to literally be the body perfect for Jujutsu sorcery. And just before we get any comments of like, well, he didn't even fight Gojo with that body, that's not what this video is about. We're not talking about their matchup or their 1v1. We're just talking talent versus hard work, right? And Sukuna was gifted with, again, the perfect body for sorcery. And on top of that, he was also gifted with the most amount of cursed energy we've ever seen, right? The only other character who is said to have an absurd amount, Yuta Okotsu, it is stated that Sukuna has over twice that much. So those two boons are insane. Now, obviously, we have no real way to compare the benefits you get from the Six Eyes and the Limitless compared to the Sukuna body and the cursed energy pool, right? And I don't even care if we want to say that the Six Eyes and the Limitless is better, but it's certainly not a situation like this, okay? If anything, we're removing the ball and chain from Sukuna, we're removing all of the obstacles, and maybe we'll place 3 hurdles on the field to Gojo's 2. So I really think that their talent level is virtually equal. So what I think this is more a question of is who utilized that talent better, who had more skill, who was more of a genius, who worked harder, right? And I know a lot of people say that Gojo is all talent, no hard work, but I vehemently disagree with that. Gojo is talent and hard work. So is Sukuna. They both are both, right? But Gojo worked incredibly hard. He only slept like 2.5 hours a night, every night, right? And we know that even after his awakening against Toji, the first time he had ever been challenged in his life, and now at a point where probably no one thought anyone could challenge him, like literally the honored one, right? He still was focusing very hard in his training, wanting to develop the domain, wanting to develop teleportation, right? So this man was constantly working. And again, so was Sukuna. So what speaks to that difference in why Sukuna had an open domain, why he was better at RCT and the binding vows? I think those differences are just these two being a product of their environments. I would say that Sukuna had a better mastery of the Jujutsu system in general. He had a better understanding of it in order to manipulate it to his favor with binding vows. Perhaps that's how he originally constructed the open domain, right? Probably because like his, again, circumstances and environment necessitated his skill tree go down that path, if that makes sense. But I think Gojo is better than him in certain regards, and it's probably a product of him having like the more flashy techniques, having the six eyes that granted him that innate understanding of cursed energy, so he probably didn't need to like study in that realm, right? He didn't need his skill tree to go in that realm. Instead, his skill tree went this way, whereas Sukuna's branched the other way, right? And that's why Gojo was the one to develop, destroying your own brain and refreshing the curse technique. Maybe Sukuna knew how to do that as well. I don't really care. All we know is that he himself said he would use Gojo's technique for refreshing his technique, right? Gojo also the one to use the one-handed domain something, also something that he emulated. So I think that each of them were better in their own certain realms, right? But at the end of the day, which this should be no surprise to anyone, I think they're both equally talented and both worked equally hard. And just because I feel like I'm going to get some people commenting that Gojo is nowhere near as skilled as Sukuna at Jujutsu, we have Sukuna using the 10 shadows in all of these crazy ways, right? And Gojo himself says, the fact that he's able to do that requires skill on my level. And the praise went both ways. Game recognized game, goat recognized goat. So to circle us all the way back around here, no, I wouldn't say that Sukuna is just more talented than Gojo, or even that he's more skilled. I think he's skilled in different areas, and those areas paid off because he beat Gojo, right? He's better at manipulating the system to his whims in the moments that it counts. He's also smart enough to have those ideas in the right moment. And also, he just spent his own life fighting for his own strength, for that one-on-one prowess, whereas Gojo focused on other things. So I think that's why he ultimately got the victory, but I don't think it boils down to him just being like unequivocally better in certain categories, if that makes sense. And to speak on to why Gojo didn't develop an open domains expansion, and if that, speaks to him being less talented, I don't think so. Again, I think it's a product of your environment. He never needed to do that. Who knows why Sukuna originally developed it that way. But also I think on a practical sense here, he needed to have a closed domain expansion to really have this battle play out the way it did, right? Like if Gojo 2 copied Sukuna and did an open domain expansion for his second domain, how would that even work? First of all, simultaneous domain expansions weren't even really a thing that should have worked, because as they were established, whatever is more refined destroys the other, right? There really shouldn't be a situation where two domains are coexisting. But they got to in this case because they were equally refined and one happened to be closed versus one opened. Like having two open domains that are equally refined, how would that even work, right? Would they just lay on top of each other? It's just conceptually hard to make work, especially if you're trying to showcase all of these things in a battle. So really, more than anything else, I think Gojo didn't copy that because it would have made the story harder to tell, and not he didn't copy it because he couldn't or lacked the talent to, if that makes sense. And then something else Sam asked me was, do I think Kenjaku is more talented at sorcery than Gojo because Kenjaku had an open domain? And no, I don't think so. Again, I view it as different skill trees, right? So I would say that both Kenjaku and Sukuna are better at barrier techniques than Gojo, but that doesn't speak to them just being overall better or more talented at sorcery, because there's lots of different skill trees you can develop. Anyways, I yapped about this far longer than I thought I would, but I would love to hear y'all's thoughts on all of this, and thank you for watching.